Hey, how's it going, everybody? Today I wanted to do a quick video talking about a build that I came up with for the god Khumba, and this is a build that I'm going to be calling the Ethereal Tank build. So it's going to be a build that pretty much completely revolves around the item Ethereal Staff, and this is a build that probably would have been a lot better in Season 2 compared to now, which we're currently in Season 3. Um, for a couple of reasons. The main reason being that this build is going to focus heavily on getting Khumba a lot of health and then using the Ethereal Staff passive to convert some of that health into magical power. So to kind of go through that further, I'm going to show you the item Ethereal Staff first, just so you can see what the passive says. So 2.5% of your maximum health is converted to magical power with this item. So in this build, we're going to be taking a lot of very high health items and putting them all in the same build, and then once we get Ethereal Staff online, we can use that passive to take our max health and convert it into even more magical power. And the reason that I think this kind of build isn't great in Season 3 compared to Season 2 is because in Season 2, a lot of items had a pretty good mix of high health and protections, and then in Season 3, Hi-Rez decided to make things a lot more difficult for us and started splitting up items a lot more, so items now pretty much either focus on health or protections. A lot of them don't have both. And I think the reason that they did this is because they didn't want any one item to give a god too much. They wanted there to be a mix. They didn't want gods to be too tanky. They didn't want supports to have both health and protections. They wanted them to kind of decide what they wanted the build to be. And so it's not like we can just go in there and say, well, I'm going to be as tanky as I can be, and you're not going to do anything to stop me. Now it's like, okay, I can choose to have high health, or I can choose to have protections, or I can choose to have a little mix of both. And so that kind of mindset that Hi-Rez has as far as what tanks can build is definitely going to hurt this kind of build, because this is focused mainly on health. It doesn't have a mix of protections at all. I think it has one item that has protections on it. So it's not a build that you should be using in ranked at all. It's definitely more of something that you might want to try out for fun in casuals. I think it's a fun build because I like the idea of just having items that have like the highest amount of health and having them all together in one build, and then using this item to kind of just give Khumba a huge power spike near the end of the game. I think it's a cool idea, and I like playing around with it, so that's what we're going to be doing. And I want to make this video relatively short. I don't want to be talking about it too long, so I'm guessing most of you know what the items are, so I won't talk about them too much, as I said. So we're going to start off with Mark of the Vanguard. I think this is better than Watcher's Gift for Khumba because it just gives him the ability to be a little bit more aggressive in lane. So we're going to start off with that item, and then we're going to go straight into Boots 1 after that. And then after that, we're going to go into... I actually go a different route as far as starting with pots and wards compared to some other supports. I really like, for some reason, I think having 5 mana pots at the beginning of the game is really great because, you know, supports have a lot of trouble early getting gold and experience in order to get their build going. And so having the 5 mana pots will allow you to use your abilities more often and to sustain in the lane for a longer amount of time. And so you can wait a little bit longer to back with this start. And hopefully by the time you back, you can finish off your boots and then maybe start your next item. So I think that's a good start. Again, you're not going to be left with too much gold after this start. I think you're left with like 50 gold after you do buy all these items. But that's okay. I think it's good to have the 5 mana pots because you're probably going to be using up all of them pretty quickly. So I think that's why I go with that, with 5 pots. So after this starts, we're going to go into the Boots of Focus. This is a pretty ordinary boots to go with for support players. I thought about going with the Reinforced Shoes. That gives you 150 health. But I think having the CDR on I mean, CDR is pretty much the most important stat in Smite right now. Being able to use your abilities more often is super important, so that's why we're going to start with Shoes of Focus for mainly the CDR. That's the biggest reason why. After that, we're going to go into an item that actually is not very popular right now, which I think is unfortunate because this item used to be one of the biggest items in Smite. At near the end of Season 2, you were seeing this item being picked up by junglers and solo laners and support players, because it just gave you everything. But now that Season 3 has started, they took away the protection. There's no protections on this item, but you do now have 350 health, which is great. And with this build, as I said, because we're focusing on E-Staff, this is the extra health is just going to help that passive out. And I think it's also important to get this item online early because of its passive. So the more kills or assists you get, every time you get one of those, you gain 15% of your maximum health and mana over the next 5 seconds. So I think getting that early is great, so you can just use that passive more often throughout the game. So that's going to be our third item. After Mail of Renewal, we're going to go into a very popular item right now, and that is the Winged Blade. This item is extremely cheap for what it does. As you can see, it gives you 300 health, some other great stats as well, and the passive basically makes you immune to slows. And for anyone who may not be up to date about the meta, or if maybe you don't follow meta changes that well, one of the things you might want to know about the current meta in Season 3 is that slows are very, very weak, because they're a soft form of CC. They're not as valued as like a stun or a root, but also a lot of supports are picking up Wingblade, which hurts any god that may have a slow in their kit. So slows are kind of, not in the meta at the moment, so any god who has a slow is suffering a little bit, and it's mainly because of this item. So this is going to be, again, another huge health spike to help our E-Staff passive out. You get the crowd control reduction, and then just the passive, so it's a great item. And again, look how it definitely should not be as cheap as it is. I think that it needs to be changed, but at the moment, it's definitely a great item, and it's definitely something that we want in this build. And then after Winged Blade, we're going to be going into even more health. This is going to be the only item, really, I think, that gives us some protections in this build. It gives us 350 extra health, so again, we're just working on that E-Staff passive, and this will give you the chance to slow any enemy who hits you with the basic attacks, so that's just going to add even more to Khumba's already huge CC chain that he has. So I think this is a great item in general. It's definitely something that I like to pick up on a lot of my supports, and I think on Khumba it's even better because he's aggressive. He can box ADCs, so if they're attacking him, he can box them even better with this item. So that's going to be the next one. And then the fifth item is going to be our E-Staff. This is going to give us the huge power spike near the late stages of the game. If you really want this passive earlier in the game, you could absolutely trade it for the mid guardian male spot. So you can do E-Staff 5th, and then do mid guardian male 6th. It's up to you, depending on when you want that power spike in the game. I definitely prefer to have the E-Staff before our last item, which is going to go in the next slot, mainly because if you're getting to late game, you might not be able to finish your build, and you want to have that E-Staff passive for at least a good 10 minutes, so you can have some strong power near the end of the game, while also still being pretty tanky. I think if you have a last item, there's a chance that you might not even finish your build, so you're risking the fact that maybe you might not even get your E-Staff damage online. So I like this to be our 6th item. And then, of course, we're going to be selling the Mark of the Vanguard around the time that you're going to be finishing off the Mid Guardian Male. So you're going to have the extra spot for our last item, which is going to be Gem of Isolation. And this item, I think, works with this build for a few reasons. So you get the extra 250 health, which is going to help the E-Staff passive even more. But you're also going to get extra magical power. So, as I said, Khumba is a pretty aggressive support player, and so I think it's a good thing to put some magical power on him. You might even see some people in their Khumba builds put a Soul Reaver in there because he already has very strong base stats for magical power, and just adding onto that with Soul Reaver will just make him really, really lethal late game. Not only being tanky, but being able to mess you up as well. So I think Gem of Iso works, and not only that, but the passive will allow you to add to the Midgardian Mail slow, and then you'll just be able to just put on even more slows with this item. So what I wanted to do before I wrap up the video is just show you what the stats will be. Um, so if we build all these items, we can see on the left here our magical power will be at 30 before the E-Staff is online. Once we build this, oops, um, once we build the E-Staff, it's going to jump up to 161 magical power, and you can see that's the stat on the top left there. So that's going to give us a huge spike once we get this item online. You can also look in the middle there. You can see the health is going to be at 4,040, so that's a whole lot of health. And then, of course, we're going to be selling Mark of the Vanguard and going into Gem of ISO, so that's going to give us even more magical power. So you see it spiked up to 234 after we get Gem of ISO online. So we're going to be having a lot of health. We're going to be pretty tanky, and then we're also going to have a lot of pretty good damage with this build. So that's the build. Again, the only real issue with this build is there aren't many protections. This is like the only protection you're going to get, so that might give you some issues. This is why I wouldn't suggest this build in any other game type besides casual, like Conquest or casual whatever, because you really do need physical and magical protections in most of your support builds. So I definitely would recommend this build for the casual player who wants to have some fun, wants to max their health, and just get in there and do some damage as well. So that's it. That's the build. Let me know what you think. If you have any other builds for Kumbhakarna that you use, feel free to share them in the comments. If there are any gods that you would like me to talk about in a build video, or maybe one of my quick look videos, I could definitely do that. But other than that, I thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.